one more day. Howdy, kids. Welcome to another episode of Escaping the Cave. It is a Todzilla X Pod. I'm your friendly, congenial, and cordial host, Todd. I like to say that. I'll let you be the judge. Who am I to say? It's episode number 146. 146. Closing in on 150. I should be a lot higher than that at this point. Record date, November 4th, 2024. Tomorrow is finally Election Day. Oh boy. I can't wait. It's got to end. It's got to end. The political ads are just... I was watching the Lions game yesterday. Every single commercial break had some kind of a political ad in it. Looking for some video, some audio I was going to use, probably will use later on in the show today. Every single link that I clicked on to get my audio, a political ad. It's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's overkill. Only elections, only American elections and the American media, the corporate media class, the corporate political class, could make democracy such a pain in the ass. It's a painful experience every 4 years. Having to endure this over and over and over again. My wife she doesn't even know how she got on the list. And they are peppering her with text messages constantly. She has no idea where they came from, and she won't click on the link to try to see if she can, subscribe out of it. Don't blame her. How do you know it's not a fishing expedition? I wouldn't either. Again, it makes it feel like democracy's not worth the trouble. When it gets within a couple of weeks, man, it's like they're taking a digital baton to your head 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The only thing you can really do, this is just basic unplug. Detach. Like a complete media detox. Terrible. I've had enough. I'm ready for this whole thing to just be over with. So hopefully you're having a better time with this than I am. I'm going to be talking a lot about information today. What's this guy's name? I keep getting it wrong. Every time I mention him, he's got a new book out, and I want to get his name right for once. Yuval Harari. He wrote, what was that? Homo Deus. He's got Sapiens. Excellent books, excellent writer. He's got a brand new one out called Nexus. It's about the development, the history, evolution of information. And I haven't finished it. I'm still sort of picking through it slowly but surely. Going to talk quite a bit about that today. And sort of try to maybe shed some light on this whole notion of the cure for disinformation or misinformation is more information. Just like they always say, the cure for the ails of democracy is more democracy, right? It's the same idea. Harari puts forth in this book that the naive view of information is that more information, unfettered information, a continual flow, a nonstop flow of information will always lead, eventually, to the truth. And then that will always lead to wisdom. That if you just open the floodgates and allow unfettered information to fly through, eventually you'll get to the truth. He calls that the naive view of information. It reminds me of what I was talking about with Thomas Sowell and I think Jonathan Haidt. They called it two different names, but they both, no, was it Haidt? No, it was Steven Pinker. in The Blank Slate. He talked about these two different worldviews that if you are a liberal or a conservative will depend upon how you view human beings. The same idea, sort of, kind of similar to what he's saying here. There's two views or differing views on information, just as there are differing views on who and what people are depending upon which ideology you've chosen. The utopian or tragic vision, I think, is what Soul called it. So if you think you're divine and that human beings are inherently good and we're destined for the stars and we're going to become the better angels of our nature, we're going to manifest, we're going to grow wings and flutter like angels eventually because that's who we really are. The noble savage stuff. That's the utopian vision. And if you believe that, you're probably a liberal. Almost certainly. However, if you believe in the tragic vision that people are flawed, people are screwed up, sinful, in the religious vernacular, just flawed, inherently flawed, imperfect, then you're probably a conservative. I'm a perfect example of this, really. That's why it really struck me when I read this, because I used to think this way. I used to, be a big fan of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the guy who's talking about. I saw him talking about the noble savage decades ago. I took as a mantra something that he sort of adhered to. This is how into this guy I was for a little while back, about 20 years ago. Vitam and Pendera Vero. Truth at all costs, sort of a loose translation. Truth before everything. It was the tagline in my email for years. And that's where I got it from Rousseau. He's the guy. He's sort of the father of the French Revolution, one of the forefathers of modern-day progressivism. He believed that if you just took all of the corrupting influences of society away from people, that they would flourish, they would go back to their noble savage roots, and paradise on earth would spring up from the ground. Utopia. So when I believed that crap, was also about the time that I was all into the synchronicity stuff, that everything happens for a purpose, and boy, I must be guided. I must be chosen for this purpose here in life. I'm being guided by the universe. Yeah, I used to believe that stuff. Back when I started traveling. It's all over my writing. If you go back and read the blogs back there from 2008, 2009, at least the first part, it's in there. ToddZillaX.com. Most of those blog posts are still up there. ToddZillaX.com. Go have a party. Go back to 2008, 2009. You'll see them. But something happened with me when I discovered this thing that I called Quixote. Again, if you're an old listener, you've heard me talk about this before. But if you're new, a light bulb went off in my mind in 2009 when I started really thinking about why is it that people always have trouble seeing things as they are, especially themselves. What is this self-deception stuff? It's about the time that I read Don Quixote, who saw himself as a knight. Right? He was all into these books, these chivalry books, and he really desperately wanted to be a knight, so he started imagining himself as a knight and took off into the world, deluding himself into thinking he was actually a knight. Quixote, if you read it through that lens, I'm not so sure Cervantes wasn't talking about. I don't know. I'm not a literature dude. But that's what it reminded me of. And that light bulb went off, and that, I'm telling you, it was already kind of starting anyway, but as soon as that went off, I'm like, wait a minute, am I doing that? Everything happens for a reason, does it? Is the universe, are all these coincidences really generated by the universe? Or am I applying meaning where maybe there isn't any? So I can feel special about myself. So I can feel special about the species and, therefore, by extension, feel better and feel better and special about myself. Yeah. That was the end. It happened in September and October 2009. I can nail it down. It was a bit of a process. I tried to go back. Everything changed with the traveling after that, too. It was weird. Suddenly had less meaning. It suddenly, the entire focus changed. I had gone from this sort of, I don't know what the word is, spiritual underpinnings, this foundation, to something more cynical. I was investigating, I was sort of looking at the people that I ran into on the road, suddenly with more cynical eyes. Had a different energy about me, and the experiences changed, of course. Soon thereafter, I started going international, and everything changed. But it's been a process with me. All because of the change in this vision. How I saw people, how I saw the world, how I saw who people really are at their core. It moved from something being divine and intertwined with everything in the entire universe. This sort of worldview, or what's the word I'm looking for? It was almost this philosophy. And a lot of people I know, one in particular, who basically think that the universe is their bitch, that the universe, the entire universe, is concerned, occupies its day, concerning itself with what you're doing and putting nice things, putting signs in front of you, like road signs to take you to a certain predetermined place where you're supposed to be, your destiny. The entire universe is preoccupied with you. It's not too far off of what a lot of people think about. I've said this 100 times, and I'm not going to, I've gotten out of the habit, out of the business of criticizing religion in the last decade or so, and I'm not going to start now. I understand it. Including this stuff. I understand it because I came from it. It gives you purpose. It gives you the audacity of belief. Think about that for a second. When you are protected and guided, when the universe is your own particular guide, your own special guide, your chaperone through life, nudging you here and nudging you there, you can't be hurt. There are things that you will do, things that you would not do if you thought there were going to be actual consequences, if you didn't think that you were wearing a metaphysical plate of armor, that the universe wasn't your bodyguard. You will do all sorts of things. I did. But I lost that. When I started to kind of, okay, let's look at this. Let's try to look at this with clearer eyes. And that began the process. Really, it kicked into high gear in 2010, and it's, here I am with a little help from my woke flake moonbeam friends. Yeah, it's inescapable to me. But I understand it. I understand the need for this guidance, this reassurance, this higher purpose, higher power, I guess. So I'm not going to condemn religion, but I will say that a lot of the stuff that I was talking about as far as the New Age religions go, that it's not far off from just the old-timey classic ones. God and the universe, they're one and the same. I wrote stuff, I don't know, more than once, comparing the two, how the universe and God are the same things. Karma is the heavenly reward. If you do good things, well, the universe, God will reward you. I never understood. I mean, if that's what you need, why don't you just go to a Catholic church? Why go through all of this? Oh, because you're more evolved. You've gotten beyond all of the old-timey stuff. God doesn't speak to you. It's the universe. Anyway. So I was talking about Yuval. Did I get his name right that time? Yeah. Yuval Harari. He talks about the naive view of information as opposed to the populist view. I'm going to read some of this here for you in a second. But the fundamental thing that I took out of this, looking ahead, looking to the future, is something I talked about a few years back. I think I said maybe in more of a hopeful sense that, like, you know what? When AI and informational anarchy and everything just gets so far out of control that you're not able to go online and tell what's true, what's false, who's fraud, who's not, you won't be able to tell. You'll have no idea. Maybe people will start just avoiding the internet altogether. It'll lose its allure and its power as a propaganda, disinformation, misinformation fire hose. Everybody will just take everything they see anywhere on the internet with a grain of salt. Almost like, a normal person going to listen to Alex Jones, maybe for the entertainment value, but you're not really going to believe anything he says. That was my thinking a few years ago. Well, I saw Neil deGrasse Tyson not long ago. Said pretty much the same thing. This is recently. He's like, you know what? It could be. Very well could be that in the future, the internet will have zero credibility. Nobody will believe anything they see. It'll almost be like the National Enquirer. That if you got it on the internet, probably full of shit. Now, that may indeed be our future. I'm not 100% convinced of that. Again, I'm going to repeat this real quick. This is Harari's view on the different kinds of viewpoints, philosophies toward information. The naive view of information, these are the people who think that more information is always good. Eventually, that there are going to be missteps and stumbles along the way, mistakes, honest or dishonest, whatever. But eventually, with enough information, you'll get to the truth. You'll get to wisdom. Eventually. Now, he uses medicine as a positive example of that. That there have been mistakes, there have been missteps, but child mortality is a fraction of what it was just a couple of 100 years ago, because of the advances in information in the medical field. But what about astrology? That's the example he uses. It's beautiful. So if that's the case, you would think, with all of the advances in science, people would just have abandoned astrology by now. Something's been around for hundreds, thousands of years, reading the stars to tell your future and make decisions and all this other stuff, right? People still believe in that, even though we now know what the constellations are, yada, yada, yada. So it doesn't always mean that. It doesn't always mean. Information doesn't always lead your horse to informational, truthful, realistic, reality-based water. Now, the populist view of information, according to Harari, says it's real simple. Information is power. It's very cynical. The populist view of information. This will sound familiar to you. Says there's no objective truth. Everyone has their own truth. And they use those truths to vanquish their rivals. It's power. Information equates to nothing more than power. Information used to win something against a real or perceived rival or enemy. People who take the populist view of information think that all social interactions are power struggles. Sound familiar? They think all social interactions basically are politics, political interactions, power-based. Because people, in their view, are only interested in power itself. That's all people want is power. Does that sound familiar to you? Who do you think would have a populist view of information these days? Now, if you're a liberal, you're lost for one thing. But if you're a liberal, you're going to talk about Donald Trump. However, if you're a conservative, you're going to see this just oozing out of the left. Everything is a power struggle. Everything is a struggle against oppression. Every piece of information needs to be spun to win the fight against oppression. How many examples of this have we seen in the last couple of weeks? Every piece of information must be spun, used as a power tool against the rival. Did Donald Trump was he really talking about putting Liz Cheney in front of a firing squad last week? Was he really? The audio seems to say no, but you would never know that. You'd never know it. And the same people, if you listen to Biden's audio where he calls Trump supporters garbage, was it really about a silent apostrophe, or was he kind of ranting and raving? Maybe understandably. I don't know. But if you listen to the full context of the audio with clear ears, take a Q-tip, shove it down your ear canal and spin it, it's pretty clear what he said. So all of this information is being used as a power tool, a bludgeon, an informational bludgeon to be used against a rival. Populist view of information. I'm going to read a little excerpt out of this book. It's from the prologue. This is just the very beginning of the book, and I've only gotten I haven't even gotten 50 pages into this damn thing yet. And I'm already reading excerpts from it, so that's usually a pretty good sign. He says the popular line of radical leftist thinking goes back to Karl Marx, who argued in the mid-19th century that power is the only reality, that information is a weapon, and that elites who claim to be serving truth and justice are in fact pursuing narrow class privileges. From the Communist Manifesto, he says, this is Karl Marx, quote, "The history of all hitherto existing societies is the history of class struggles. Freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guild, master and journeyman, in a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in constant opposition to one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight." Unquote. According to Harari, this binary interpretation of history implies that every human interaction is a power struggle between oppressors and the oppressed. How often do we hear oppressor, oppressed? Are you wondering why I'm calling this Marxist? It is. It's one of the main tenets from the manifesto. Harari continues on, saying, accordingly, whenever anyone says anything, the question to ask isn't what's being said, is it true, but rather, who is saying this? Whose privilege does it serve? Now, I confess, I do that all the time. The first thing I think of whenever I hear a piece of information is, who is this coming from? What is their agenda? Not their privilege. I don't really care about, well, maybe I do. But you have got to be a fool. In the golden age of propaganda, misinformation, disinformation, all of it, but the golden age of electronic speed of light propaganda, you would have to be a fool not to first ask yourself, who's saying this and from what viewpoint are they coming? What agenda are they trying to serve? Maybe not privilege. Maybe it is. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. Maybe you could sort of spin that as a privilege kind of thing, but what agenda? What are they trying to sell you? If a salesman walks up to you on a used car lot, you know he's going to try to sell you a car. If a Mormon walks up to your door, you know what he's selling. Well, if a political critter gives you some scripture, I always do that. I've done that for years. What is this person trying? Where is he coming from? Is he really trying to get to the truth here? Is he really interested in truth at all? Is he interested in anything objective, or is he a proselyte of some sort? Trying to sell something, trying to advocate for some organization, some tribe, some congregation, or maybe sell himself. Maybe make himself look good. Maybe he's trying to rationalize to himself one thing or another, and he's doing it verbally, practicing on me. I don't know. I'm always considering this stuff. It's made me incredibly cynical. I have a very, very hard time not doing that anymore. It's second nature. It has been for years. But you have to be an idiot not to engage in that these days. Everybody's selling something. Everybody is propagating something. One side or another. It's so rare that you find anybody who's interested in actually finding the truth. Some people are really good at hiding it. Some people can pretend. They can wear this cloak of independence. For a long time and convincingly, but eventually, soon enough, the cloak starts to fray. The bare partisan ass starts to show through the back, eventually. Now, he doesn't just target the left here. He says right-wing populists such as Trump and Bolsonaro, that's the examples he used, they're unlikely to have read Foucault or Marx and indeed present themselves as fiercely anti-Marxist. They also greatly differ from Marxists in their suggested policies in the fields like taxation, welfare, blah, blah, blah. But their basic view of society and information is surprisingly Marxist, seeing all human interactions as a power struggle between oppressors and oppressed. Think about this for a second. How many right-wingers do you know? I've noticed this a lot. Oppressors and oppressed. The rich elite, the rich people, the corporations are holding us down. Rich people is holding the political elites is holding us down. It's everybody else's fault. It's victimization. When you're talking about oppressors and the oppressed, you're talking about victimization. And my God, victimization coming from both sides in this country. Playing the victim role is a plague. It's second nature. There's always a boogeyman holding the good man down. Always. Because it's so much easier to blame somebody else. And sometimes it's true. I'm not saying it's not true all the time. I'm saying it's become second nature all the time. It's become second nature all the time. To some people, that's the first place, the only place they go is, I'm not responsible, it's somebody else's fault. Harari uses the example of Trump's 2017 inaugural address when he announced a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government while the people have borne the cost. He's still doing that shit. Such rhetoric is a staple of populism, which the political scientist Cass Mudd has described as an ideology that considers society to be ultimately separated into two homogeneous and antagonistic groups, the pure people versus the corrupt elite. Are you pure? Are you sure? Are all the elite corrupt? Are you sure? Harari says that just as Marxists claimed that the media functions as a mouthpiece for the capitalist class and that the scientific institutions like universities spread disinformation in order to perpetuate capitalist control, populists accuse these same institutions of working to advance the interests of the corrupt elites at the expense of the people. Populism, to me, I've said this before, not breaking any news here, it's a scourge. Not a fan. Definitely not a fan. So that's the difference, I guess, between the naive view and the populist view of information, at least in the view of what's his name? Yuval. I want to call him Noval. You know why? Yuval Noah Harari. That's his name. I'm just going to say Mr. Harari from now on. If I try to say his first name, scold me, smack my hand. There. Now, I mentioned astrology earlier. Got a little chunk of what he's talking about as far as this information, like this unfettered access to science, like information, facts, bullshit, whatever, that eventually, if enough information comes, people will get to the truth, accept it, and become wise. It says he referred to stars as information, which is a fascinating sidebar here. When he talks about, he describes stars as not only places, not only things and real tangible things in the sky, but also their information, because they tell us things about the rest of the universe, the rest of existence, the rest of reality beyond our own experience. So they are information. Fascinating way to look at it. But he said he referred to stars as information and casually mentioned astrologers alongside astronomers. Adherents of the naive view of information probably squirmed in their chairs when they read it. According to the naive view, astronomers derive real information from the stars, while the information that astrologers imagine to read in constellations is either misinformation or disinformation. If only people were given more information about the universe, surely they would abandon astrology altogether, right? But the fact is that for thousands of years, astrology has had a huge impact on history, and today, millions of people still check their star signs before making the most important decisions of their lives. Like what to study, whom to marry. As of 2021, he says the global astrology market was valued at $12.8 billion. So now, access to information, cleansing information, clarifying information does not assure anything. He says we should acknowledge the importance of astrology's role in history. True enough. But he continues on to say that what the example of astrology illustrates is that errors, lies, fantasies, and fictions are information as well. This is important. Lies, fantasies, and fictions, they are information, whether you like it or not. They are. Contrary to what the naive view of information says, information has no essential link to truth, and its role in history is not to represent a pre-existing reality. SpaghettiOs. Rather, what information does is to create new realities by tying together disparate things, whether couples or empires. Its defining feature is connection rather than representation, and information is whatever connects different points into a network, an informational network. Information doesn't necessarily inform us about things. Rather, it puts things in formation. Horoscopes put lovers in astrology. Horoscopes put lovers in astrological formations. Propaganda broadcasts put voters into political formations. And marching songs put soldiers in military formations. Information. From there, he suggests that we consider music as a paradigmatic case. I've never used the word paradigmatic in my life. That was the first. You were there. Most symphonies, melodies, tunes don't represent anything, he says, which is why it makes no sense to ask whether they are true or false. Think about that. Music, symphonies, all that. Are they true? Is music true? It's information, right? It's delivering something, feeling whatever, but is it true? It doesn't make any sense to ask if music is true or not. Over the years, people have created a lot of bad music. That's for sure. But you know what they've never created? Fake music. He says, without representing anything, music nevertheless does a remarkable job in connecting large numbers of people and synchronizing their emotions and movements. Oof. Music can make soldiers march in formation, club members sway together, church congregations clap in rhythm, and sports fans chant in unison, Jared Goff, Jared Goff. I don't know if that's musical, but Cadence, rhythm, tone, inflection, speech. Speech has, good speech has a musical tone, a musical rhythm, a musical cadence. Now mine, I don't do that. Well, that's what they said about Hitler's speeches. Like, have you ever listened to his stuff translated to English? He has a cadence. He has almost like a score. Had almost something like a score back then. Almost like a template, almost like sheet music, where he would start really slow and soft, and then there would be this crescendo where the entire crowd would just be. It has a musical tone. It has an intro, maybe a hook. Some of these songs, some of my favorite songs, start off really slow. Zombie Stomp by Ozzy Osbourne is a really good example of that. It just starts off, boom, 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 and then bam, it hits you right in the face. It's like, whoa. Mr. Harari, the book is Nexus. It's brand new just this year. I like this guy. I love this guy. He's not afraid to say it. He's not afraid to say the hard part out loud. Meet more people like Mr. Harari. What's his name? Yuval. I think I said it. Got a couple of more things from Harari's book for you that pertains to storytelling. Says that people think they connect to the person when they're talking about somebody who maybe they're, following, or maybe they like, maybe they've fallen in love with. Whenever someone connects with another person, they connect to the story told. They connect to the story told about that person. Nobody really knows another person fully. They know the presentation, they know the facade, they know basically what the other person wants them to see. The story. That is a story. It's not much different. When you interact with another person, I know there's going to be a bunch of, I'm always real and 100%. It's just stop. I don't want to. No. You're not. Constantly, when we go out, when we interact with other people, we're putting on a performance. We're showing these people what we want them to see, how we want them to think about us. Thank God. If everybody was 100% authentic, if even 20% of the world was 100% authentic all the time, we'd blow ourselves up in 3 days. It's part of living in a society. It's part of the status game, on and on. Not going to get into all that now. Let me start over with that. I'll repeat this from the beginning. People think they connect to the person, but in fact, they connect to the story told about that person. And there is often a huge gulf between the two. Amen. Preach on, brother. Talking about politics, we're going into an election tomorrow. The people who follow Donald Trump, the people who follow Kamala Harris, the ones who actually support one or the other, they don't know either one of these two individuals. All they know is the story, what they've been told and what they've been shown, what they've chosen to see and what they've chosen to hear, and how they've chosen to interpret that stuff. You don't know either one of those two people. You can't. You cannot possibly. There are very, very, very few people in your life that you truly and authentically know, and there is absolutely no one in this world that you completely know, that you 100% know down to their core. And I'm going to say it again, don't give me that shit. Ugh. I'm always real 100%. No, you're not. I can't with that. I know better. Something else he says is that whatever the facts may be, the story will prove irresistible. Now, this is oh my God, is there anywhere where this isn't on display? Regardless of the facts, that story that I just mentioned about the person they follow, about the person they believe in, whatever, regardless of the facts, the story. It's the story, stupid. It's the story that will prove irresistible. The narrative, if you will. And I really wish you wouldn't. Regardless of the facts, the story will prevail. He says that most of the really big stories of history, they've been the result of emotional projections and wishful thinking. True believers play a key role in the rise of every major religion and ideology. This is Joan Didion, the madmen and the fanatics. The people who believe so passionately and so wholeheartedly that this or that or the other thing becomes some kind of a moral imperative, and that is when we hear the thin whine of hysteria throughout the land, I think she said. It's where the madmen come from. The psychotics, the fanatics. They believe so wholeheartedly. They're not being deceptive when they say they believe something. When they show you their passionate belief in something, they actually believe it, and they believe it to such a degree that whatever it is they're trying to do becomes a moral imperative. The world it's a fight against evil. And of course, because they believe it so passionately, they are the righteous ones. They are on the side of one God or another, be it theological, ideological, political, doesn't matter. It's a battle against good and evil. Moral imperatives, fanatics, madmen. Social justice messiahs. Again, the parallel with religion here, it's striking. I was one of the first ones on this. I'm going to toot my horn. Toot, toot. Had this pop up on my Facebook feed. I was talking about ideological religions 12, 13 years ago. Not so long after I got out of my own. After I lost my religion, I started to see it. I started to see these similarities in the fundamentalists, the political fundamentalists, how they reminded me of religious fundamentalists, theocrats. It's the story. And if the story puts you at the center of good in a righteous battle against evil, it's intoxicating. It's almost irresistible. And it's so intoxicating and so irresistible, not to even talk about things like social momentum, that when facts interfere with that, they will be ignored all 100% of the time in favor of the story, in favor of that comforting story that elevates you in your own mind and puts you on the side of good in that battle against evil. And the final thing that I've got noted here, not sure if it really ties into that. I'm going to throw it out there anyway. Bands that shared stories and intersubjective realities. And that's another good one. Intersubjective realities are things like when you believe in things that don't really exist, intersubjective. Shared subjective realities, intersubjective. Things that don't really exist, like God. You share that belief, that subjective belief, things like justice, doesn't exist anywhere but the human mind. Fairness. These things do not exist. Not in the real world. Nowhere else in the universe outside of the human brain do these things exist. These are intersubjective realities. But when you've got bands that share these stories, share these intersubjective realities, you have found something. You have the ingredients for a tribe. Tribalism. And we are fully tribalized now. Fully. I mentioned this. This last stuff, when it comes to stories, how you think you connect to a person, but you're really kind of connecting to the story of that person, the presentation of that person, what they want you to think, or maybe what you want to think about them, whatever. It reminded me of a documentary I saw on HBO, brand new. I think it just came out in the last couple of months. It's called Mr. McMahon, on the WWE, on Vince McMahon. It's on Netflix. Fantastic. I devoured that series. Lots of people have talked about how politics is like the WWF or WWE, professional wrestling. Matt Taibbi made that comparison in Hate Inc. And as I'm watching this, I'm listening to Vince McMahon, I'm watching the presentation, the character that he's built up. Mr. McMahon. That's Donald Trump. That is Donald fucking Trump. Donald Trump has created a political wrestling character. Maybe the heel. I don't know. But that's what this is. He's created this story, this storyline around who and what he is. And he is on he's on the stage acting it out. Not even just the political stage. He's been on the stage his entire life acting out this role. This storyline. Think of Donald Trump as a wrestling character. Compare him. Go watch that series. Go watch Mr. McMahon. It's on Netflix. And think of it. Watch it in the context of Donald Trump. Watching it with an eye toward how McMahon and Trump appear similar. What I really liked about this, outside of the fact that when I read this about how people, when they connect with a person, they're connecting to the story, and how facts will never interfere with the story. That's Donald Trump. That is Donald Trump. It's the story. It's the presentation. And one of the things about Trump that I think I finally put my finger on was watching this documentary when they talked about kayfabe. You know what kayfabe is? I didn't. When I was a kid, WWF was huge, man. When I was a teenager, we all watched it, and we couldn't figure it out. We had no idea. We thought it was probably fake. But we couldn't imagine that they would fake all of this. Back in the 1980s, not being teenagers anyway. But something happened in the mid-90s where I think they had this huge match, and these wrestlers whose storylines said that they hated each other hugged it out of the ring, I guess, because one of them was going over to another wrestling thing, league, organization, whatever it is. And what they did was they destroyed the illusion. They opened up a crack in the drama. They let you look behind the curtain on the stage to see what was really going on. Kayfabe. Protecting the illusion. Protecting the believability of it. Donald Trump can't do that. He learned that lesson. He can't let anybody. It would be political death. If he were to ever admit he was wrong, if he were to ever show any kind of weakness, that would destroy the character. It would destroy. It basically would be kryptonite to his character, the character he's playing on the political stage. And Republicans, or Democrats, try as they might, all the way since 2016, I'm not going to get into the right or wrong, any of this stuff. It really doesn't matter. Even of all of the facts that they had, all of the attempts to destroy him politically, Even if they were all 100% true, he's Teflon because, what was it again? Whatever the facts may be, the story will prove irresistible. He understands that. He has to protect the story. Kayfabe. The documentary is called Mr. McMahon. It's on Netflix. I highly, highly recommend it. Even if you don't want to watch it, even if you're kind of curious about wrestling or kind of a fan, whatever. Oh my God, it's excellent. So in the interest of equal time, let's talk about Kamala. When we're talking about kayfabe, let's discuss Kamala, shall we? What's the story? What is the story that people are clinging to, choosing to believe about Kamala Harris, that she's some sort of a savior of democracy, the first woman of color to be, this close to the presidency. She has a real legitimate shot at being elected president tomorrow. And she's going to save us from the evil vileness that is Donald Trump, fascism, Nazism, all that stuff. That is the story that they're putting forward. That she is the righteous savior that's here to save America. I talked a little bit in the last episode about how the word salad stuff is sort of a tool, right? It allows her to really answer questions without answering questions, without saying anything. She puts out a stream of words. Somebody will ask her a question. And if she wants to answer it, like, is Donald Trump a fascist? Well, she's very direct. Yes, she'll say. But when it has something to do with fracking or some other position that she held, one of my favorites was, do you support giving illegal immigrants and incarcerated people access to free gender-affirming care? Because you said so. We have video of you saying so. And she said she didn't answer anything. The question was, do you support that? Her answer was, I will follow the law. She didn't say anything. The question was, do you support it? Is this something that you are in favor of? So we can kind of figure out who you are, Kamala. I will follow the law. She does this all the time. She refuses to answer questions about her record. With fracking, she says she supports it. I've evolved. Has she? How do we know that? Have you ever heard a politician say something deceitful during a presidential campaign? Have you? That's one of the things I don't want to get too far down the rant on Kamala thing. I've done this enough. This may be my last chance if she doesn't get elected. So maybe I should. This is one of the things that really, really bothers me about her. That she will not. She's hiding something. She acts like she's hiding something. Maybe she's not. I don't know. But she acts like she is. What is it you're hiding? Well, my suggestion to my friend, who was saying he didn't know really what to think. Maybe he is one of these undecided voters. I don't know. Maybe he's a legitimate centrist who's sort of stranded, a castaway on centrist island, so far away from these two extremes that he doesn't know which way to paddle. Maybe that's the case. My suggestion to him was to go back and listen to what she said when she was unburdened by what has been 4 years ago. And see what she said when she was running in 2019. Well, I've done some of the busy work for you. Enjoy.
If they fail to act as President of the United States, I am prepared to get rid of the filibuster to pass a Green New Deal.
You support giving universal health care, Medicare for all to people who are in this country illegally?
Let me just be very clear about this. I am opposed to any policy that would deny in our country any human being from access to public safety, public education, or public health, period.
Will you commit to implementing a federal ban on fracking your first day in office, adding the United States to the list of countries who have banned this devastating practice?
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking.
We have to reimagine
public safety in America.
She's promoting policies like saying that every single carbon emission in the country, every car, should be eliminated within the next 11 years, everything from a 70 to 80% tax rate. Do you agree that she could possibly, in this ideology of the socialist left, could splinter your party?
No, I think that she is challenging the status quo. I think that's fantastic.
Would you support changing the dietary guidelines?
Yes.
The food pyramid. What people
yes.
To reduce red meat specifically.
Yes, I would. And
plastic straws are a big thing right now.
Yeah.
Do you ban plastic straws?
I think we should. Listen, I think there's no question that we've got to critically re-examine ICE and its role and the way that it is being administered and the work it is doing. And we need to probably think about starting from scratch.
Millions of specifically assault weapons that are already in circulation. What do you do about those?
Well, there are approximately 5 million, to your point, Craig. We have to have a buyback program, and I support a mandatory buyback program.
So would you ban offshore drilling?
Yes. And I've, again, worked on that.
Just two things I'll highlight from that. She talks about reimagining. Reimagining, that was a big buzzword. A big deconstructionist buzzword back in 2020. Reimagining public safety. What she was talking about, defund the police. Reimagining public safety. This was back when defund the police was all the liberal progressive rage 4 years ago. She supported that. She supported raised bail for people who were arrested, rioting after George Floyd. She was in lockstep with people like AOC to leave it, all of them. And the mandatory buyback program, let's parse that. Mandatory, you know what that means, buyback program. So the people who have these guns, she wants to mandate that they must sell their weapons back to the government. What if they say no, and most will? Then what happens? I've talked about this 100 million times, it seems like, on the show. It's the thing that knocked me out of the anti-Second Amendment camp. It knocked me out of the anti-gun crowd. Because there's a simple question. What happens? What do you do when they say no? They're not going to do this. What do? You're going to go door to door? Are you going to take them away? You're going to forcefully enter their homes and take their firearms away from them? How is that going to go? Are you going to go yourself, or are you going to send somebody else to do it? Maybe have a little conversation with Liz Cheney about that. But are you going to go, or are you going to send your kids, or are you sending someone else's? Oh, we got to get rid of the Second Amendment. You can't do that either. If you know anything about how the Constitution is amended, and that's what it'll take to get rid of the Second Constitutional Amendment, you're not going to do that either. So either she is an idiot, a moron who hasn't thought any of this through. That's the only possible solution. If she actually believes the stuff she's saying here, as far as mandatory buybacks go anyway, she's an idiot. If she actually believes it, or she's just, shoveling a bunch of bullshit, or was shoveling a bunch of bullshit a few years ago. So that's part of what I have. The other part is sort of let's call it a rebuttal. She's sort of changed her tack over the last few days as she's trying to close the election, trying to present her closing argument to the American people. She's gone from joy, joy, happy, happy, joy, joy to, defeat the Nazi, defeat the fascists. Now she's transitioned into this other part of her campaign where she's saying she wants to be a president for all of the people. She wants to bring the country together. Oh, kumbaya. Really?
Because we know this is not someone who is thinking about how to make your life better. This is someone who is increasingly unstable, obsessed with revenge, consumed with grievance, and the man is out for unchecked power. And it is clear from John Kelly's words that Donald Trump is someone who, I quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, who in fact vowed to be a dictator on day one and vowed to use the military as his personal militia. Donald Trump is increasingly unstable and unhinged.
Let me ask you tonight, do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I also believe that the people who know him best on this subject should be trusted. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
Then, of course, there's the border. And she would like you to think that she was never put in charge of the border, that she was never called the border czar, that Joe Biden never tried to give her some authenticity, some credibility by giving her something to, quote unquote, work on, instead of just putting baby in a corner for 3 years. He tried that, and it was a complete and utter failure. I'm a guy who has historically supported even illegal immigration. I don't anymore, because it's gotten completely out of hand. I do subscribe to the theory that it's out of hand on purpose because they're trying to remake the electorate. They're trying to reshape the demographics, the voting demographics. And I talked about this before. I talked about my experience in New Mexico working at this Mexican-owned radio station in Taos, and how one of the owners, or the brother of the owner, flat out told me he didn't like me much because I was a gringo living in Taos. He didn't like me, and he was very happy to let me know that the Mexicans were coming. The Mexicans were coming. Well, they're going to keep coming, and they're going to eventually take over the political process, at least in that part of the country, if not nationwide. He proudly told me this. He had no reason to think. Why wouldn't he tell me? I'm one of the huge gringo minorities in northern New Mexico at this point in time. Proudly told me that. And now, how many have we seen? How high have the numbers risen in the last few years? She was put in charge of the border, and oh my God, nothing got done, and all of these illegals came streaming across up until Dementia Joe decided to finally take some kind of executive action this year. He could have done this any time in his presidency. First he said he couldn't, and then he did. Okay. But nothing happened. She was in charge of it. Nothing. It got worse. Well, why do you suppose that is? Let's find out.
I know what a crime looks like. And I will tell you, an undocumented immigrant is not a criminal. It is wrong to somehow suggest that an undocumented immigrant is a criminal. Listen, I think there's no question that we've got to critically re-examine ICE and its role and the way that it is being administered and the work it is doing. And we need to probably think about starting from scratch, because there's a lot that is wrong with the way that it's conducting itself, and we need to deal with that.
Well, the Klan was what we would call today a domestic terrorist group.
Why? Why would we call them domestic terrorist group?
Because they tried to use fear and force to change political environment.
I'm not finished. Are you aware that there's a perception that ICE is administering its power in a way that is causing fear and intimidation, particularly among immigrants, and specifically among immigrants coming from Mexico and Central America? For young people, students, they're college students, they're serving in our military, they are living productive lives, and this administration has decided to vilify them and to trade on them for the sake of this president's medieval vanity project called a wall. But let me be very clear. I'm not going to vote for a wall under any circumstances, and I do support border security. And if we want to talk about that, let's do that. I disagree with any policy that would turn America's back on people who are fleeing harm. I frankly believe that it is contrary to everything that we have symbolically and actually said we stand for.
Medieval vanity project. She will never vote for the wall, the border wall. But now she supports it. Since it's her idea, it's not a medieval vanity project. She tried this On one of the interviews, I think it was on CNN, it was the one-person debate that she managed to lose. Or she started to mock Trump for wanting to build the wall, and then Tapper asked her about, well, you support the wall. You just said you support building the wall. You saw the Windows logo start to spin on her face right about that point. And when it comes to illegals, obviously her priority, her stated priority, when she was actually saying something, when she was actually stating her positions 4 years ago, she wanted to protect illegals. She wanted to give illegals social services. She wants them here. She wants a steady flow of illegals in this country. She doesn't see illegal immigration, illegal immigrants as breaking the law, as criminals. I'm pretty sure we're the only country in the world. We would be the only country in the world who took that stance. I've been throughout Latin America. I know if you try to immigrate illegally down there, good luck with that. So yeah, her own words are damning. When she actually speaks, when she actually articulates her views, they were some of the most extreme views of anybody in the primaries in 2019. And now we're supposed to believe that she's moderated, that she's evolved, as she said. When she's asked about these questions, she just goes into word salad mode and says nothing. This is who you're voting for if you vote for Kamala Harris. And one of the biggest issues for me personally after October 7th is Israel. She's acting like she's giving all of the word service to supporting Israel because it's a losing proposition. It's a losing proposition outside of Dearborn, outside of Hamtramck, outside of the Muslim enclaves around the country. And on the far left, the people who think that genocide is happening in Gaza, that Israel is a colonial occupying state. One of the stupidest things I've ever heard. But it is a drag on their campaign. Supporting Israel is a drag on the campaign with Muslims and with the extremists on the far left. So she has a problem there. So she's moderated her message. What does she really think? Who knows?
Tonight, mixed messages. A K-file investigation this hour finds Kamala Harris is targeting crucial battleground voters with vastly different messages on Gaza and Israel. This ad is running in Michigan, which has the largest Arab population in America.
What has happened in Gaza over the past 9 months is devastating. We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering, and I will not be silent.
All right, well, it's a very different story for an ad in Pennsylvania targeting Jewish voters.
Let me be clear. I will always stand up for Israel's right to defend itself, and I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself, because the people of Israel must never again face the horror that a terrorist organization called Hamas caused on October 7.
Different message. Andrew Kaczynski is out front now. So, Andrew, those obviously do sound starkly different, to say the least. Tell me more about what you found.
Yeah, that's right. And look, this really illustrates the sort of fine line that the Harris campaign is trying to walk here in the closing weeks, closing days of this campaign on the issue of Israel. Here you have two entirely different constituencies, and they are getting two entirely different messages. There are often times these constituencies have very opposing views on this. If you are a Jewish person in Pennsylvania, you saw that ad that you're getting. You are getting that ad that talks about how strong she is in Israel. If you're a Muslim voter in Michigan, you are getting that ad on Facebook that's talking about how she won't be silent on the issue of Gaza. Now, what's really interesting here is that ad that we just played, the one that's going to Jewish voters in Pennsylvania. Now, it sort of sounds like those two clips of her talking about Israel are together, but they actually cut part of it out. Take a listen to what they cut.
What has happened in Gaza over the past 10 months is devastating. President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination.
And you've seen, too, that they cut out that portion of the ad where they talked about Gaza from her DNC speech. Those two parts were together. They sliced them. They cut that part out. Now, look, she's also getting hammered a lot on this issue by Republicans. We talked just a couple days ago about how those robocalls were airing in Wisconsin that are made to sound like they're in support of Jill Stein, talking about her position on Gaza, saying that they're highlighting her pro-Israel position, and they're sort of trying to siphon those votes away from her. So this is a really delicate issue for her.
Oh, it certainly is.
If you were just to watch these clips, watch these ads, listen to these speeches, you would not know exactly where she stands as far as the war in Palestine. Palestine in quotes. Lebanon, where she stands in Iran. You have no idea. You do not know if this woman is going to support Israel if she's elected once she's inaugurated in January. Are they going to cut arms shipments? Do you trust her to be commander-in-chief? Considering the fact that she refuses, absolutely refuses, to be clear, to state clearly her positions on anything, takes me back to 2019. It leads me to believe that she hasn't changed anything, that the woman who was blown out of the primaries for being too radical, even in 2019, despite being a woman of color, that's going to be the woman, the president we get if she's elected tomorrow. And I will take it back to what I said in the last episode and what I've said a million times. This feels contrived. It feels like almost like a coup. A way to circumvent democracy because she got almost no votes, no support in the primaries in 2019, leading into 2020. Again, I'll say it again, she did not get to 2020. She was never a serious candidate because she was rejected. The American electorate found her repulsive in 2019. She didn't get there, but yet she was chosen. She was appointed as Joe Biden's running mate in 2020 against Trump. And they won. And now, after 3 years of nothing, after 3 years of putting baby in a corner because she's inept, repulsive, repugnant to most people, Dementia Joe stays on the ballot too long through the primary, so they don't have an actual primary. He drops out, and here comes Kamala, appointed again to run up against Trump. And that was followed by this onslaught, this propaganda blitzkrieg that we all endured after she was basically inserted onto the ballot without being chosen by anyone but the Democratic machine. And now here we are, a day out. It feels like a DEI Trojan horse, a far-left extremist Trojan horse, based on her own words, her own stated positions 4 or 5 years ago. 5 years ago. Because she never got to 2020. So what are you supposed to believe? Are you supposed to believe the version of Kamala that was articulate and specific 5 years ago, or the one that just speaks in nonsensical circles? The one that tries to befuddle with bullshit. Talk around the questions. It seems pretty clear to me that if you really want to know who you already do. You can go back and you can listen to her own words when she was actually running a campaign, when she was actually trying to run against other people, put her positions out there in more fertile ground, apparently, back in 2019, where the Democrats seemed to think that the antidote was to Trump's far-right rhetoric, I guess, supposed far-right rhetoric back then in throughout his first term. They thought the antidote to that was far leftism. The pendulum swing. Well, we can be just as extreme as you, just the other way. But they slowly started falling off because nobody was voting for him. I have a podcast back there. I may dig these out, actually. That may be kind of nostalgic. But I was talking about how even back then, the extremists were just being bludgeoned. People like Bernie Sanders and a couple others, but Kamala Harris was another one. That in the Democratic primaries back then, the moderates were kicking their asses. There were just too many of them. There were all sorts of like 4 or 5 moderates, but then you had the extremists like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Kamala before she got kicked out. But the moderates, people didn't want extremism. Yeah, Bernie was getting his votes. He was getting more votes than these individual moderates. But if you tally the totals of the moderates together, more people were voting for moderates than were voting for these leftist extremists. Back in 2020, they figured that out. They figured that out pretty early. And that's when Biden started to have his comeback. You remember the comeback? It's when people like Klobuchar got out of the primaries. And the moderate vote all started going to one person, Biden, and then Bernie was he was torpedoed. But they hadn't seen that yet. They hadn't figured that out yet when Kamala was still in the race. She was still running to the far left. She was running, I think, as the candidate she was, as the person she was. And she can't come out and directly say that she's not that person anymore, because she is, and she doesn't want to turn off anybody who remembers that stuff. So she talks in circles. So what we really have here, as I said before, is this, this choice between Mussolini and Stalin. Maybe not quite that bad on either end, but that's what it feels like. You've got a far-right extremist. You've got somebody running to the far right, nationalism, isolationism. And then you've got somebody who is trying to pretend they're a moderate, but really the choice is between the far right and the far left. Where are you supposed to go? If you are a common sense centrist, if somewhere in the middle, just want some normalcy, some competency, where are you supposed to go here? It's almost an impossible choice. That's where we've gotten. The extremes have taken over. The stories have taken over. You got the utopians on the one side, and you've got the nationalists on the other side. And there's no room for anybody else. You have to pick one or the other. The far left socialist or Trump. Yay, democracy. So I guess, for me, when the tally is taken, when the electoral math is done and tabulated, I think the thing you do, if it's me, if you're asking me, and you're listening to my podcast, so I guess technically you are asking me, what you need to do is vote your own damn self-interest. Who would be better for you specifically? And obviously, being a straight white middle-aged man in this country. Kamala Harris. A vote for Kamala Harris is not in my best. A vote for that entire cult. It's not in my best interest. If you're a white, straight, middle-aged dude, and a lot of you are, is a vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for cultural Marxism in your best interest, is a vote for the oppressed and oppressor paradigm being applied to every single aspect of American life. Is that in your best interest? Are you an oppressor? Do you want to be treated as an oppressor? Do you want to be categorized and labeled as a purveyor and a perpetuator of white supremacy? Whiteness? Oh, whiteness. Oh my God, terrible. Is that who you want? Is that who you want running the country? Do you think Kamala Harris is strong enough to deal with people like Putin, China? Do you support them cutting off arms to Israel? Because that's exactly, if this is the woman, if this is the candidate, if this is the president she's going to be, an extreme far leftist like she ran in 2019, is she just going to abandon the far left pacifists, the far left anti-Semites, the anti-Israelis, the pro-Hamas wing come January? Are we going to see more movements to defund the police? Are we going to return to the summer of 2020? Does that sound appealing to you? It's your vote. You can vote for whoever you want. My podcast will still be here. You're still welcome to come and listen. But that's my thinking on this. It sounds horrific. Anybody who's perpetuating that utopian vision, who thinks they're on the path to heaven on earth through, the means of social justice, subjective, intersubjective social justice. No. That's a recipe for disaster. I'm going to spare you the abortion rant. You're welcome. I got some work ahead of me tonight. Feels like kind of a long one. I'm not sure. Did get a video up on YouTube. If you want to see the video from the last podcast, go ahead and check it out. It is up there, ready to go. I'm probably going to have another one. Probably have this one up. Not sure if it's going to be up today, maybe on Election Day. The election companion. Woo! Also thinking about doing a couple of clips, maybe reposting a couple of the podcasts that Brian and I did around election time in 2020, as I was mentioning earlier, maybe for the nostalgia effect. I have one back there. If you're against the Electoral College, you think it's archaic and evil, I have a pretty good argument for it. We had that conversation a few years ago. Still applicable. escapeofthecave.com. Why did I mention that? It's still there. Go check out ToddZillaX.com if you want those old blog posts. They're great. YouTube, ToddZillaX, also over at Substack, ToddZillaX. Check all that stuff out. Like, subscribe, share, do all that good stuff. Thanks for clicking in. We'll talk to you next time. So long.